There you go. You want last week's too? I thought it was, unless there was a new list, I had written down.
So this was what was submitted here. Okay. So that, okay. And I just want to make sure that I'm referring.
Is that an RB 417 or RB 410? Number 8.
Are they different questions?
Well, one was discussing the problem we have the RSU SAD members serve on committees dealing along with the secondary. So that's a different one. So is this one RSU 77?
Yes.
Is that the one?
Yep.
Okay. So that's RB 417.
Could I get that to make a copy?
Yeah.
I don't believe I have that.
You go, sir. Annotated.
This is the one you already have. I think weren't you talking about this one right here?
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and start and we can have this discussion.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Did you take that document?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
You want to just make sure you got it?
Which one is that? I made
So-
copies here.
Well,
let's-
RB 417.
You have another copy?
I may have, yeah, I had a bunch of them last time.
You want to go ahead and yeah.
Okay. Oops. So I make a motion that we approve the minutes by consensus.
Let's do a quick roll call and we'll go right to that.
Okay, Richard Sears is absent. Stephanie Euler.
Here.
Brian Vendiano.
Here.
Richard Burgess. Here. Ed Ford.
Here.
Charles Hermon is absent. John Renz.
Yes, sir, Reed.
Kim Nichols.
Here.
You.
So does everybody have a copy of last week's minutes?
Yes, sir, Reed.
Motion on the table made, Mr. Renz. Second to approve the minutes from last week.
Second.
All approved.
And no corrections. That I saw.
So we'll go right to old business. Looks like the discussion ended off in number 8 of that list. Does everybody have, so the number 8 were, the document at the top is titled Process of Motions. That was submitted. And so that document, just general discussion point, there wasn't any more to it than that. So we'll refer to that as number 8 on the minutes.
Can you just read off to me number 8, please, Nicole?
So example 8, move to allow delegates from RSU, it says 77, that means that
Should have been 87. Yeah.
87. To sit on committees only dealing with secondary issues.
Secondary school issues.
Secondary school issues.
Do you want a copy of this, Josh? I think I got a spare.
Maybe when we're done, I'll send you a copy of that.
So is that a motion that's on the floor now, or you just read that?
No, I just as using that as a, yeah.
Yeah, Rick made those as a suggested motion. He gets 2 gold stars.
So I think last week was the discussion, Brian, did Brian bring that one up as far as wondering, was that the one we were talking about that was missing from?
Yeah, it was removed from the 17 charter. For some reason, it was in the charters prior to, but for some reason it was removed on the 17 update. And it is only in the contract. So my question was, what was the purpose of, what's the background on having it removed? So,
Well, it is on the charter, it is on article, the front page of the charter, it is on there for secondary issues.
it's on page 2, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's simply the summary of what's in the article. So in any charter, the summary page is a summary of, the actual articles, and so if Article 6, whatever the next one, doesn't include secondary education specifically, it's an invalid summary. So I think tripping over the summary page might say secondary education won't be productive. More interestingly is why was it actually removed from the charter article? Because I can assume that it was simply not updated on the summary page.
So what you're saying is we wanna make it parallel. It says it over here, it should say it in here.
Well,
Nope.
Alright,
let's-
no, okay.
were we able to find that, why it was removed, Josh, before we go any farther?
So as far as finding why it was removed, we haven't found that yet. I did include the purple and yellow of the last two amendments that were voted on by the townspeople from 1994 and 2016. And really, I just provided those because it's kind of interesting to look at them and just see
Was
what
that
was.
item in there? Sorry.
Well, as far as covering all the amendments that we may see in the charter, it doesn't do that, but it does, as we were researching, I did stumble across these and felt it would be beneficial for the group to still look at them.
It's nice to see.
And can I make a point? When we were discussing this last time, and the time before actually, it came to light that the committee members don't have a vote. That they simply make their recommendations back to the council, correct? That would
For
be
subcommittees, yes.
yeah, the subcommittees. But we missed a key point, and I probably did in bringing it up last time. One of the major reasons that I brought this up was that I think the feeling is that the members that joined the Hermon School Committee from Levant and Carmel should not have a vote when it comes to electing the chair or the vice chair. That should be restricted to Hermon council, our committee members, not the other two. So even though they're not voting on any of the things that come out of committee back to the whole committee as a whole, they should not be allowed to vote for the chair or the vice chair. That's a Hermon council, a Hermon committee, and they should be elected by the 5 Hermon members. And if need be, I'll make a motion to, when we get to that point, to recommend that to the council.
Let's stick, I don't know if that's germane to what the current discussion, I think we want to stick with.
Well, it is, I mean, in the fact that the question was,
Right.
do the people from Levant and Carmel get to vote on things, and we've determined that they don't, because they don't come out of committee to vote. It's strictly recommendations back to the main committee, correct?
And that question specifically is to our attorney too.
I thought it was, but we talked about that way back, you know.
So if it's to the attorney, how can we make a determination here then?
I don't
Until-
think it hurts for us to, make these recommendations, and if the attorney says that's not in your purview, then we don't submit them to, anything we do is gonna be reviewed by the attorney to say whether or not it's legitimate.
So Josh, when you're talking about what we were discussing last time, that's the question that went through the.
Whether, there's several questions, most from last meeting, but what Mr. Burgess was referring to,
As far as voting,
voting on the chair.
chair,
And that was something that actually I got involved with Josh on back 5, 6 months ago. And we were trying to get opinions from the attorneys on whether or not it was proper or not, and never really got that summarized, so.
They didn't specifically talk about that section, right? Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't wanna just leave that out there. If the committee's like, I mean, I certainly would wanna have both discussions and give it to the town council. You know, I mean, we can vote on it or not, or just consider that a discussion item. It's up to the committee. I think the town council would like to hear what our thoughts were on that. I mean, I think both points should be heard.
And I think as a group, if we wait for the attorneys, we may not get done in time. We're basically this week and next week, so I think we should just make a
I'm with you.
decision, and then if it is ruled to be out of bounds, then no problem.
I just wanna make a question, I have a question. So it seems like we went from one subject to another, so
Yeah.
the first one was whether or not the RSU 87, it should be somewhere in here. As it's in the, on page 2, Article 4, I'm sorry, Article 6, but it's not in section 601. Was that the question?
Not in my mind, no. I see
Okay.
page 2 as a summary, and I don't think the summary was updated when the changes were made. I mean, if you look at another summary page, it'll talk about,
The Board of Assessors.
there's several summaries in here that aren't up to date, and I forget which one I saw that had to do with money. Article 8, I think, was $25,000 or more for capital projects. And it's not correct in the actual articles. When you have a charter, the summary is not the binding. It's the actual articles that are written. So
So
the
the
fact that,
articles are what?
I think we ought to just be looking at the articles, not the summary. The summary comes after what we've done with the articles.
Like a table of contents.
Yeah. I mean, you don't live by the table of contents, you live by what's actually in the book.
And so Brian, I'm probably a little dense, but, so you're saying it's in here, you weren't saying we ought to, so on page 2 it exists. You weren't saying it should go into section 601, that wasn't even in there.
No, I
Okay.
thought what the conversation was, it started with, in Article 6, there used to be a statement about secondary education only. And
Well,
that,
I think,
and that was removed in Article 6. And then in the summary of Article 6, it was not removed.
okay, so,
But it is in the contract.
It is in the
It
contract.
is in the contract.
So the question I had was, what was the reason for removing it in the articles whenever it was removed? Because it is in the contract.
Let's start with that if you wanna. So that we'll go RSU 87, the discussion about the 2 RSU 87 representatives to speak on secondary issues. I think we should
Yes.
discuss that, because then following that, I think we should separate that discussion out. Should they vote on chair, if you guys wanna separate, or that voting on secondary issues could cover all of what they do, RSU 87. So it doesn't matter to me if you wanna split that apart or leave it as, but certainly let's have the discussion on, so the RSU 87, if people have discussions on those representatives, voting on secondary issues, that seems to be the bigger point.
If I could just make a very specific point, and it's a term that gets me off track. The charter is clear that they're not representatives, and I know it sometimes can be semantic in terms, but they're clearly written as members. And that took me a while to get over, the difference between a representative and a member. They're a member of the committee and have all the voting privileges as a member of the committee within the charter.
To me, that's gonna be
It's
separate.
semantics, but
No, I don't
whether
think
it's a
so.
member or a representative.
No, I don't think so. I think if you have to read, so if we're in that, let's look at the first line of what you're talking about, of the charter. In addition to 5 members above, there shall be 2 members of the school committee. The school committee is RSU 87.
no, the school committee is the Hermon School Committee. There shall, and I read there shall also be as not a they shall, but we shall. In addition to 5 members above, which outlines what Hermon provides, there shall also be, so the town council is telling the school committee, there shall also be 2 members of the school committee to be appointed by the directors of RSU 87 for as long as secondary school tuition students from RSU 87 doing business as SAD 23, and we're going to change that to just all RSU 87, are contracted with the town of Hermon, comprising no less than 25% of secondary education student population in the high school. So that, in the way I read that, is the town council is telling the school committee, being the chair, there shall be 2 members of the school committee from RSU 87, as long as RSU 87 has a minimum of 25% of the secondary school education.
Okay. So I never saw them as like members. I always considered them separate representatives of a separate school district that certainly have their own school district that they deal with. They're coming into Hermon. I just looked at that as coming into Hermon as, because of the 25%, their only discussions are around the secondary students, not elementary or.
Again, it should probably take a legal representative to read it. But when I read this, it reads as there shall be 2 members of the school committee that are appointed by RSU 87, resulting in 7 members of the Hermon School Committee. That's the way I read the chart.
Then probably we should just have the lawyers look at that. 'Cause that's definitely, I don't read that as in addition to 5 members above. So they identified 5 members above. There shall also be 2 members of the school committee to be appointed by the directors of. It's missing some RSU 87, but it's missing a few words there. You know, I don't think it should go right into, that's a very long sentence. And that should be broken down. We may or may not decide to do that, but I mean, clearly there was 2 members that are coming in and they're given specific duties.
That's not, I understand what you're saying.
Right.
That's not what the charter is saying, though.
Yeah, and then, because then it goes on to say the school committee shall have all the powers and duties prescribed for a school committee by general law and state names.
Except
It does not have anything to do with, doesn't
Except
state,
otherwise.
it doesn't
Don't
state.
forget the end of that though.
Go ahead.
Except otherwise provided by the charter.
Yes,
We should be dropping in what we wanted to say.
but currently it does not.
Good point.
And that is where it used to say, this portion that is in the contract, that said joint committee may be empowered to develop policies, select and employ the teachers of the high school, to fix salaries, to arrange course of study, to supervise the instruction, and to formulate and enforce the proper regulations pertaining to other educational activities of the high school. And that is what the law statement was. Voting privileges would be confined to those areas spelled out in the appropriate sections of the state of Maine laws related to public school. And that's what's in the contract. And that's what used to be in the charter. And that's why I've asked the question of why was it removed from the charter?
Let me ask you a question. Maybe we should look at this a little differently. What would we like this to say? Because I think you made a good point, Rick, about should they or shouldn't they vote for chairman, etc. Maybe we want to say, you know, and I agree with what Ed said, maybe it should go under here, say as a, I don't know, number C or letter C, they will be restricted to voting somehow. They won't be allowed to vote for this.
So the question I always ask, identify the problem. Do we have a problem? And when I read this, it says 7 members, 2 made up from Hermon, 2 made up from RSU 87. If you're a member, can you vote on chair and vice chair? Is there a problem right now? That's for the community to discuss of whether there's a problem. I don't see a problem.
Well, I see a problem if we're adding 2 members that the Hermon citizens don't vote for.
Nope.
We're adding 2.
I did get some numbers though, often this year's earlier data. This is the first quarter of the school year, so the data is a little skewed now. But in the high school, so when we talk about who's representing what, in the high school, the first quarter of school, there were 562 students, grade 9 through 12. And somewhere somebody can say that's changed. It has. It was the first quarter of school. Hermon accounted for 296 students, equaling 52% of the student body, and there were some decimal points there. I can't remember if I rounded up, rounded down. RSU 87 had 233 students, resulting in 42% of the student body. And then other, which were tuition students from Glenburn and other communities, equated to 33 students or 6%. So when we talk about the representatives from RSU 87, they make up 42% of our high school student body. And if you were to follow that down to district numbers, this is somewhat of a faulty number because it did not include our pre-K and K numbers. But grades 1 through 12, there's 1,189 students, so that excludes K pre-K. And RSU 87 therefore makes up for 19.6% of the total school population. If you were to include K pre-K, you would have to reasonably reduce that percentage down to probably 16%, just rough numbers. So we're not talking about an insignificant portion of our high school. We're talking about a large body of our students.
What are you hoping to accomplish by changing it? How's changing this gonna benefit the students?
So the change would be only having those two representatives talk on secondary issues.
And define secondary issues,
So anything that has to do with the high school, as much as can be defined.
which starts to be tricky, because does superintendent involve high school? I think when you start to get narrow like that, it just gets tricky to say, well, what's secondary and what's not.
And I think state law says, what the superintendent, what the school boards can do. I mean, I don't think we're looking, I think it's more important that the RSU 87 representatives, stay out of that rather than how do we, kind of force them into some of those discussions. It may be better for the school board to decide that some of those issues around that aren't secondary, the school board, I mean, why can't the school board decide what that is?
So,
We
so
can, that's why we have the
that's why we have it that way, the
Yeah.
contract. And that's why we don't want, exactly what you just said, that's why we don't want the charter to be able to narrow it down. If those RSU 87 folks aren't comfortable voting, then anybody can abstain,
And they often,
and they often do.
But I think you nailed it, Ed, when you said that it shouldn't be at the charter level, it should be at the body that's doing the management, which is the school committee. I mean, I've inherited, but the contract spells that out.
And so we're talking about these members here, again, we don't wanna, I mean, this is just my opinion, anybody else, but I mean, we don't wanna call them members, they should be representative, I think they should be looked at as RSU 87 representatives that come in as a part of representing their high school kids that are coming only to high school. So that's the only thing, I'm not trying to fix anything, I don't think there's anything wrong here, what we're trying to fix. I just think that Hermon citizens are voting for their school committee, and they're expecting them to be the managers of their school, not adding two more into that aren't part of that equation.
I understand exactly what you're saying, but RSU 87 also is paying, and they make up 42% of high school.
They do this year.
And next year, they will also, the numbers for next year, and I couldn't go out further than that because I didn't
How
have
do
the
you,
numbers.
wait, for next, you mean 24, 25?
24, 25, the percentages stay the same. The student body goes from 562 to 584.
So what, is that like EPF, what are you reading, where do you get those?
I got those off in actual students that are in seats in RSU 87 and students that are in our seats right now. So
So
graduating class of 12, grade
Okay.
12, and then you have the 8th grade class. I could see the 8th grade numbers.
Okay.
So I was comfortable saying that there is 584 students as of December that were programmed to come to high
And
school.
I think it's important, again, I don't wanna, I'm not trying to, hog the argument here, but I just think it's important that the charter, we don't want the charter to represent a snapshot of what that is, because clearly, I think in general, we are just looking to protect the Hermon citizens that are voting for their representatives come in. That's my only point here.
Yep.
And to take a snapshot, look, that could be 72% one year, and it could be 26% another year. So to try to, all of a sudden in 2 years, if they only have 26%, but we're saying they have two members that are actual voting members that have the same privileges as our other five, I don't know how fair that would be for, the Hermon School Committee or the citizens that voted. So again, I only say that to say, I'm not sure if that snapshot, I appreciate that, that's a lot of data. And I just don't know if it makes up everything in the conversation that we're trying to have.
Okay, so
To keep-
what is the problem that we are trying to have.
So
I'm
currently-
trying to wrap my head
No,
around it, yeah.
And so currently, there's a piece in here, even though there's parts of it that say that they don't have secondary voting privileges on the article summary, somewhere that was removed. I think the problem, we're trying to clarify that, what are the responsibilities of those two RSU 87 members? That we're trying to clarify that.
I agree.
Citizens have asked that.
It's not clear.
Okay.
And I agree with that. I have a question, I'm just thinking here like solution focused. I wonder if we're able to put into the charter that a contract would be drawn up, whatever it is, for a 3-year, and it will define the responsibilities, for RSU 87 and for Hermon School.
And it does, doesn't it?
It does already, yeah.
Well, it's not clear though. It's not clear that it's in the contract. Because we've got conflicting things here. And, I mean, I don't know if it matters. I mean, again, what problem are we solving? But I'm just thinking, if you read this, the contract sort of has one thing going. This has something else going. I think also there's maybe some understanding about how things are working. I mean, realistically, we got one member, but that's a separate topic. One member from the RSU. And again, thinking out loud, if we say we're gonna have a contract, and it will define some of this stuff, is that a reasonable way to do this? And then you turn to the contract and say, oh, well, this is what's going on.
That's probably why it was taken out years ago. You nailed it right there. That's exactly why it was taken out.
So I think that to me, it all, again, I read this and I'm kind of literal, you guys have figured it out. I would, if I'm looking at this and I'm Joe Average Citizen, and I want an answer, for whatever reason, I got a hair out of place, and I would say, I wanna know, how come they don't get to vote on, elementary stuff? I go to the charter, it doesn't really say that, it kinda does. But if it says, go to the contract, and the contract is clear, and that, I don't know why that could not be in.
And we could add within the charter stating that the school committee, as the contract states, the school committees of both bodies of RSU 87 and the town of Hermon will have a current contract that outlines duties, responsibilities, and voting privileges of RSU 87.
Are you reading that, or did you
I
just
just
say
made that up.
Oh, I'll second that.
Yeah.
No, but that's the language that would make me a happy
Yeah.
person.
And then that would specifically reference you back to the contract that is done between the two superintendents and then approved by the two bodies, which would be the RSU 87 Board of Directors and the Hermon School Department.
And it would maybe also address what you said about, can they vote? You'd have to spell that out in the contract, but they won't have the right to vote for chair, vice chair. Or they would, either way.
You know, I think following up with what Ed was saying and what you're saying, the snapshot, so to speak, we may or may not have a problem today, but there's no guarantee we won't have a problem next year or the year after. And I'm selfish as hell, but it's our school committee, and I think our people should be running the school committee and have the chair and the vice chair and make the decisions of who is going to be. And I don't think the RSU people have any right to decide who is going to be the chair. And that's just my opinion. But.
Could that be
Until I got on the committee, I absolutely believed what you just said.
Yeah.
But once I got on the committee and I worked with Deb and Shannon, and now Shannon isn't there, but when I began to see how things interacted, and I spoke with Principal Walsh, and I started looking at the numbers, and I saw how integral the RSU 87 students were to the school and how influential they are in the budget, I truly kind of got a better appreciation for the fact that they have two members there for a reason.
And they should have. I don't think there's any. I just think the controlling factor should be with our people. That's
And we do. We've got the voting majority. Is the way I look at it.
Well, and also, I mean, it seems to me like, and the contract allows us to have a vehicle that body, if something, and I would have, and just like you looking at numbers, kind of projecting for next year, I'm sure there'll be some sort of a trend, if there's gonna be a huge decline in enrollment from the RSU, then, then possibly they'd have the flexibility to amend that, or in the next contract
Well, when the
negotiation,
contract comes out.
without having to go back
Right.
to
Yeah.
take more specific stuff out of the charter. In my head somewhere, I remember that chart when that was pulled out, and I think it was because those more finer details and more specifics were, wanted to be in the, negotiated in that contract, so that way it didn't make it so constrictive in the charter as well, so, that's,
Is there a motion on the table? Did you make that?
There
I
is
didn't
not.
make a motion.
Mr. Hellman, do you have any input on that? or-
I just think that, if an RSU 87 person, if they were nominated to be chairman of the school committee, for example, they're not going to be elected with, you have 5 and 2, so the only way they're going to get appointed or put in that position is because everyone agreed to it.
Actually, it spells out clearly that the chair and vice chair must be from Hermon.
Okay, well,
It just allows the RSU 87 members to vote on who that vice chair and chair is.
I like that.
I think, from what I'm hearing and other people have heard from other folks in the citizen, that the general consensus was we were looking to refine those two positions, not expand them. And I think some of the discussions here are expanding them. Like if all of a sudden we're taking the contract, we're changing the Hermon charter according to a contract. I think that's backwards. I don't think it should work that way. I think the charter should drive the contract. And you've got a contract, you don't agree? Maybe not.
No, I just finished.
So, and you guys have a contract coming up. I mean, some of these discussions should certainly be part of that as far as when you're making your contract to try to.
Right.
But from what I've heard, number one, we were trying to refine those positions, not expand them or give them any more. Unless, that's all I was hearing. So, that's the only reason if anything, if you look like I may be contracting a little bit on that is because that's what I was hearing more, to refine it and make it a simpler process for those two to understand what they can and can't vote on. Rather than expanding it, all of a sudden we're making them members and state law drives what school members can do.
But
But they're
that's the
already
problem,
members.
they are members. The way we read the charter, and that's why I've asked for legal review, it clearly states that they are two members appointed by the RSU Board of Directors, and they shall have all the power and duties prescribed for school committees by the general laws, state of Maine, except otherwise provided by this charter as follows. A and B don't address anything, and that's why the idea was floated out there of the town requiring us to have a contract, because the charter does not require us to have a contract.
And there's a stipulation in there, as long as all of a sudden it drops to 24%.
So, moot point.
No, I mean, those two go away.
Yeah, right, to moot point, those guys go away, absolutely.
I mean, I wouldn't, as a school board, I wouldn't say, oh, we're below 24%, 25%. Those two have to step off for a term. I mean, I think that's where the school board would make a decision and maybe, say, hey, we're gonna give them, another year or two to catch up or whatever. But I don't think we should write in there that they're gone. But clearly the charter is saying that if they drop before 24%, and all of a sudden if we're giving them school board members power and then they're going away, that seems a little harsh.
Yeah, but that's the way the charter's
Or
written.
that, I know, that's why.
Again, I'm a very black and white person with it.
And that's,
Yep, they're 24%, so we'll take your
again,
nameplate.
and I may have already mentioned, I don't wanna I don't wanna read the contract and change the charter to fit the contract. That's not, I don't think that's I'm not sure how good an idea that
The
is.
tail wagging the dog.
Well, I mean, how often does contracts go? I mean, they're 5 years, but I mean, that's a long time to be
What about,
trapped in there if something changed.
Well, I mean, you could in the charter say it's only gonna be a 3-year term.
I don't, well,
Well,
I don't wanna put one more work
I
than
mean,
we were
those sort of
asked to do.
things is what I would expect to see in the town charter, to say that you will have a contract and it will be a term for, but it doesn't spell out what the guts of the contract is.
So, so get back to my question, is there a reason we couldn't add, so we're section 6.01, a contract will be developed between the two, and it will define blah, 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 define responsibilities, just like the contract does now, and it's renewed every 5 years or whatever. I mean, we're not gonna say some of that stuff, but I mean, is there a problem with that?
And in a way, I mean, I'm kind of defaulting to 3 years because we look at teacher union contracts as 3-year contracts. And it's because your term is for 3 years. So when you negotiate a contract, the next time the contract comes due, you're gonna have re-election of your committee members. So in theory, you have a new board or a new school committee negotiating that contract.
So again, maybe I should make this motion, I think. We put it in as sub C here. Right, so we got A, we got B, C, a contract, I don't know how you word this, but a contract will be negotiated between the superintendents. And then it will define, just like the contract does, responsibilities, maybe term. I don't know the word, that's what I'm saying. So again, I'm Joe's citizen, and I say, well, what do they do exactly? I can go to this and say, oh, so then I can go to the contract, and it'll be spelled out. To me, it just seems clear, and it's not telling the charter what to do, nor is the charter telling the contract what to do. It's just, this is where you go.
Did you see a place in the charter where it listed 5 years?
No.
I didn't find it either.
That's
Just
just
says
how
that we have
long,
a contract.
it doesn't even say they have a contract.
Yeah, it does. It says applicant
that's-
contracting with the town of Hermon.
Okay, yep,
Where's that? Where?
right here.
Third paragraph.
Or contracting.
That-
This is
Okay.
purpose as well. Yep.
So you're suggesting maybe that we insert 3 years?
Yeah, we could insert a term, the length of the contract, if that would.
Well, yeah.
Wait, where are you reading again?
I think we're in the third.
Third
6.01, third paragraph.
And then it was third line, right after SAD number 23, our contracting.
Make that more specific.
Yeah, I mean, we
I
could
know.
add to that sentence, the contract will be negotiated between the superintendents. The term of the contract will be, just throwing this out, 3 years. See contract for specific details on duties, responsibilities, etc. And again, I don't really have a dog in the fight about where it goes, it's just more letting anybody who's looking at this say, oh, well, this is where I can find out, what's expected, who's doing what, what's the length of term, how many are supposed to be there, whatever. And, we had a copy of the contract too, didn't
Yeah.
We do, yeah.
Maybe I'm looking at this wrong, this is expanding this rather than either holding it or trying to refine. Because clearly here it says for as long as the charter is really, the spirit of the charter is just saying that as long as there's a certain amount of students there, there's gonna be 2 members, representatives on this committee. That's all that's saying. I don't feel like I think at this point, Josh would have to have the lawyers look at that and say, can we come in and all, to me, that's expanding that. If we're gonna start putting a list of things that they can do or mentioning contracts in there. Are there other parts in this charter that get into detail? And I don't recall right off. Are there other parts in this charter that, excuse me, that do that go into that detail with other vendors or other, parts in the town council that start referencing contracts, and there may be, I don't know if that's.
I'd have to look.
I didn't see anything that did.
I don't.
I think it would be easier, again, I think it'd be easier to define what those two members do on the school board than it would be to start adding language from a contract that is gonna change every 5 to 3 years.
Well, hold on, can I just say?
I absolutely agree with you, but at the charter level, it then becomes, you're trying to tell somebody how they're gonna file the toenail on the gorilla in the room. Because I don't think the charter could get into the detail that I think they're trying to address. I think the charter would have to push the detail to the contract. Because what I just heard you say was we don't wanna expand the charter, which I agree.
Right.
But by putting those subjects and that level of detail in the charter, in essence, you're expanding the charter.
But if you took out the word members, there should be 2 members of the school committee to be appointed by RSU, 2 representatives from RSU 87. Setting on the school committee, you have to word the language, but then they wouldn't have the same power if they weren't quote unquote members, they would be representatives of the RSU.
A representative, though, by term, doesn't have any voting privilege. It has 0 voting privilege when I think of a representative. So what we're saying is we want RSU 87 to have 0 voting privilege.
Just on secondary issues.
Then they're a member that can vote on secondary issues.
Again, I don't know if that. I mean, we would define that, what is, somebody would have to define, what that is. We could look at there aren't any other schools that have this relationship with them.
I don't know.
There's probably not many, if any. So it's not like we can look at others, but
So again, let's define the problem, back to defining the problem.
okay, so the problem is that in addition, prior to this, people were saying they needed this defined somehow so that people could understand, these 2 members, once they step on the stage, could understand exactly what it is that their purpose was there and what they could vote on.
Sure.
So then can we
Well, wait,
agree that
that's
they
one
should
issue.
vote on secondary issues? Then can we agree that they can only vote on secondary issues?
I think it's.
Isn't that what the charter says in the summary?
The summary isn't the charter, right?
I'm
But
just saying, I think that was the spirit originally of
I
that.
agree, that is the spirit. So they can only vote on secondary issues.
So why not let the contract define that? Why not keep the charter as is and let the contract define further what they can and can't vote on?
Who sits on the contract? Is it just the school board, the superintendent?
The superintendent.
RSU 87 superintendent,
Yeah.
and then their board also.
Yeah.
So what's happening is it will be the chairs and the superintendents meet, and then it's presented to the Hermon School Committee for voting.
And it outlines, at least this contract, responsibilities for a lot of things, transportation, professional discussion committee, blah, 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 lots of stuff is in there. And I don't think that detail should be in the charter.
I agree.
So then, can we put a motion on the table to leave the charter as is and amend the article summary to take off the empowered to vote on secondary matters, just put a period after the 2 from RSU 87.
Hang on one second, you lost me for 1 second.
Because as Brian's, or
Oh,
somebody
oh, oh,
said,
oh,
the summary, the table of contents isn't, there's a discrepancy there, sure. So,
I'm not even sure we need to do it, that probably should already be done.
It should have been
That's
done.
probably an update that
That's
needs to
just
happen.
almost like a
anyhow.
typo or something.
Right.
Not necessarily something that needs to come
Right,
through a
but
formal.
we can chalk this up to our review that we found these inconsistencies
Yeah,
that they.
And
need to
I
change.
agree with what you're saying. What I'm stumbling over is why was that secondary education taken out before us?
No, that would be an interesting point. I just, it's 2025, 24. It's a completely different animal, and I get it. I mean, I understand. It'd be nice to know what the reason is, but the fact is we're not held to that. We can certainly make it whatever, And the discussions that folks have had with me is you know, I have a tendency to wanna take from the summary and put it in there to make it so, so what's the downside to putting that these folks at RSU 87 have their responsibility are secondary school issues, and then putting that in their contract going forward, letting those folks identify what that is in that contract only. Because the contract deals with, is there transportation in the contract?
Yes, transportation,
Right. So-
there's several things, yeah.
Is there a part of it, is in the contract in there, you talk about elementary transportation?
Nope.
Or, okay, so that's already defined, that the transportation issue is secondary issues only in the
Right.
contract.
Right.
So how come we can't bring from the summary into the charter that it's secondary issues, and then let those folks define what that is? And I think it is pretty open, but I mean, you're not gonna say, well, I really want our folks to discuss, you know, middle school issues. You know, can't you put that in the contract? And they will have to go to the charter and say, no, it says secondary only. So they're held to that. Am I missing something here? Because I mean, ideally, and again, this is just what I hear back, is that people want that defined in the charter, if indeed, I think they always thought it was defined here in the summary. And to some extent, I think citizens at their level probably would just say, look, it's in the summary, it's in the charter. That's the spirit of the
Yeah.
charter.
It's not supposed to be in the summary though. I mean, I think that was a typo.
Somebody would have to show like it's not supposed to be there,
Yeah, and it goes back to when was it removed, back to the original question.
or maybe it was just forgotten to bring that in addition to that.
No,
I
it
don't
was
think,
in there.
No, I don't know. Again, I'm just pretending because I'm guessing just like everybody else. I was being a little sarcastic, but I'm just saying, I don't think we want to guess that. But if we want to discuss it, and honestly, this is a good discussion. I don't know. We had talked earlier about not having a motion other than having a discussion and passing it on to the lawyers, but it doesn't matter to me. I don't think, I mean, if people want to vote on it, we should do that.
I'm just
But-
a little confused though, but I think, do we have two things going here at the same time?
So right now, I appreciate that.
yes,
Maybe three.
No, but I think we started off that we were just talking, these two representatives, secondary issues. You're right, there is the other part about them sitting on a committee and,
There's another point,
Oh, the
Voting on the
vice
chair,
chair.
vice chair.
Do they
Chair,
roll?
they just do that.
Right.
Robinson.
but anyway, so yeah, so we're just talking about the beginning issue first, as far as secondary
Okay.
voting,
Right.
voting responsibilities for those two, so.
and it's interesting, because Stephanie made a point. Some of those things you couldn't tease them out. So, but saying that, I don't know, I guess. it's
For
good.
what? I don't understand what we.
Well, I was just trying to think, let's just say an issue came up about COVID. And I would assume it would cover the whole school, secondary, middle school, elementary school. So, and maybe that's not a good example,
I think it's a perfect example.
but could they then not vote?
The
The two representatives, because it's a whole school issue, are they disqualified from voting?
from voting from middle school and elementary school stuff?
Yeah,
they-
and
they
let's
have-
just say it's a little different, maybe the hours are different or something, I don't know.
And they would not be able to vote on those items. The high school, they certainly could.
No,
And on their own home, the two schools that they have at home, they would be voting on also.
right, but no, but these are Hermon kids, it comes to the committee, right? So, maybe that's not the best.
No,
Well,
you're
I think
you're
you're going down
exactly
the
right.
right road where we're hung up on. There are very few issues that we deal with on the school committee that are high school only.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you try to tease out this, it becomes it's been designed, as Mr. Hillman said, that there are 2 members from the RSU, 5 members from Hermon, so that Hermon has the largest voice because we have the most amount of money in it, most amount of students.
But I think what that was saying was,
They're just asking for the public for more time to speak. I wanna look at that, because in that, sorry, I had to find that contract. In that contract, I mean, it goes through a lot of details.
It does, yep.
yeah. And I don't think I read this a couple times now. It's not a bad contract.
It's where the detail belongs.
Yeah.
And again, maybe the point is, we don't fuss too much with this. This document actually isn't too bad. I'm just thinking, I know I'm repeating. Can we reference that there will be a contract, so if anybody says, I want the detail, I know where to go.
I think it already is,
It
somebody
says
said, are
contracting.
contracting with.
Right. But I'm adding, and the specific details in the I mean, I don't know, maybe it's a footnote.
There will be a contract and it will be done, renewed every 3 years.
And we'll outline responsibilities for RSU 87, and it'll outline, transportation, blah, 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 blah.
If there's enough students.
Well, that's already
That's already
here.
in there.
Yeah, we got that one covered. But it's so what I've got here, we haven't really said voting on the chair and vice chair, although I think,
That would be at the contract level, is what we're
Right.
saying.
and I think I read that in here. Okay. My only question is, and I'm not gonna say it one more time, this is it. Would it make sense that we reference the fact there is a contract that defines more specifically in the chart? And maybe we don't have to, maybe it's not a good idea. I personally think it's not a bad idea, if someone wants to find out there is a contract, they look at the charter, oh, so I go to the contract.
So, well, I mean, it's already in there that there's a contract, so I don't know if folks want that more defined on what that means or not. But, I mean, it states in there that they are contracting with,
Right.
doesn't state the details of it, so. Couple options here, folks, not trying to move on, Mr. Hermon. If you got, you'll jump in, I know you will.
No, that's.
But, so a couple things, we talked about recording the discussion and handing that to the lawyers. Do you feel like there's a legal issue there that has to be framed before we go forward here in some of our discussion? And it doesn't matter to me, we're gonna give them the discussion anyway, whether they get a vote on it or not. So I think the committee, we should probably figure out a motion and vote on that, and then write down our discussion and then have the lawyers take a look at it. Let's hear any other ideas.
I thought I already made a motion to leave it as is,
Leaving what as is.
the, charter.
In terms
For
of that.
detail, yeah, for
particular-
details to be defined, because that's when I said to change what was in the summary, and Josh said, well, I don't know if we need to actually add that into it.
And I think that the confusion's not the right word, but the non-clarity of it will continue, and that's fine too.
And what non-clarity are
So
you
Brian
looking
brought
for?
up a point, like they're called members, I think that would have to be defined somehow.
I don't see any clarity issue with that at all. I think of all of what we've discussed, that's the clearest thing to me out of the entire portion of 6.1 in regards to RSU 87. They are members of the school committee.
And a lot of people would absolutely, so that's getting back to the clarity piece. People would not look at that, they would not, if you went out and asked parents and said, do you know that they are identical members to the other 5 members, I think you would have conflicting, number one, conflicting what they think is true, but number 2, it would be conflicting on whether or not that, because they only serve in the high school, whether that's appropriate to have them members for the entire Hermon district. So that's the clarity piece. I'm not trying to have more discussion on it, but I think that's the clarity piece that we need, that we're here to fix, or at least make an attempt to fix.
I think part of it is just, you have to read the words. That portion is very clear. If we wanna change it, that's a different subject.
I don't think it's changing,
Well,
but
but
that's,
let's go back, somebody made a motion. And I believe the motion is not to change existing wording in whatever paragraph that is.
Paragraph
I don't wanna take.
That's correct.
Okay, I
no,
will second that for discussion. So now we know what we're talking about.
so the motion on the table is currently, we're gonna, correct me if I'm wrong, what we're gonna do is the charter will stay as is. Currently, the motion is, Mr. Lorenz has seconded that.
Right.
I see that you're taking notes feverishly over there, Josh.
So I just wanna make sure, we're talking about
6.01,
6.01.
Correct.
paragraph with one edit on wording, drop the N and compromise. Or drop, it's supposed to be compose, right?
Comprise.
Or comprise, I'm sorry.
If we don't change it, where would we, and here again, we're back to that consistency between the charter and the contract, where would we change the contract term if we're gonna recommend a 3-year contract versus a 5?
That was just a discussion.
Yeah, I know, but I mean,
That would be something that I would see as a C, paragraph 3 sub C, that the town wants to specify that we don't like a 5-year contract, we want a 3-year contract.
So we can have an amendment that said that to the original motion.
Sure.
So would you wanna make that amendment?
yeah, I will.
So then we gotta have a second on the amendment.
I'll second the amendment to,
Hang on, just, what was the,
Motion, the amendment was to, add the contract would be a 3-year contract versus a 5-year contract.
That would be a C, so it would be expanding, go back to what you were saying.
Yeah, so it's basically saying, I think what you were saying, the details in the contract include, but it would be 3 and 5 years. Okay. I can't second that one, so somebody else has.
I was just, and again, this is not a time for discussion, so. I mean, there are other legal ramifications that, I mean, are there other contracts that these things run concurrently with or combined with?
not that I'm
The
aware of.
union doesn't, I know, but I don't know either, I'm not into it.
Well, it
So-
could be, but I think we need to look at what's our job here. We can't define the law. We may make a recommendation that conflicts with the law. Then, well, somebody will have to do something about it. All we're doing is, this is what we think, these are our preferences, based on reviewing all this.
So I think I'm gonna not allow the amendment, if that's okay. If you wanna retract the motion, that's fine. I think I like the motion. I think that is a completely different subject, and I absolutely, if we wanna put that on an agenda item, I think we should discuss that. But to drop that 3-year here, I don't know if that's proper.
I don't know where we should put it though, in that section of the.
No, I mean with her motion.
Well, but you can have a second to it, we can defeat the amendment, and then vote on the original motion. Right.
I think the motion, and somebody can correct me, the motion's on the table, it was seconded that we leave the charter exactly how it is. If you wanna defeat that and go into another discussion on another item, we can certainly, absolutely, we can do that.
So are you saying then that the motion to amend the original motion dies for like the second?
So there's a motion on the table, so do you wanna retract your second?
No.
Okay, then,
The chair isn't going to allow the motion.
But then there was an
There
amendment
was an,
Right.
that was seconded. So
Which
first
is
we
that.
vote on the amendment, and we can defeat that or pass that.
We go back.
Then
to
we
the
vote
original.
back to the motion, and we can defeat or pass that.
So is everybody clear on the amendment would be, so the amendment is added to a motion, that's why I'm not sure procedure here, but,
That's correct, though. Yeah, we follow the rules, and so, do we? Well, it doesn't matter.
I just
Okay.
gotta really suggest that we consider adding public comment to the beginning of this meeting, because it's the second time that we've run up against time.
What we're gonna
And I
do-
made that suggestion last time, so I was hoping we can do it next time.
Absolutely.
I've forgotten about that.
So what we're gonna do, number one, is we're gonna extend the meeting when it comes time in just a couple minutes. Number two, we have to have an agenda before we can do that, prior to the meeting. So we have, the people that are public have to have an agenda in their hands as, even if it's a few hours, but certainly a day prior to, if we're gonna move the public comment forward, that was my only.
So are we posting agendas for the public?
No. They're not being posted.
We're making it, I put them together today. Based on time I have
Yeah.
to provide this committee.
Okay, can I skip, there's another point. We can table this discussion. We've got the motion, we get the amendment to the motion, we get a public comment now. Pick it up,
We've got a motion, then we have to make a motion to table it.
yeah, well, we can do that,
Let's,
but we wanted to, well, or we can vote on it too, so.
I think
At the end of last meeting, we tabled number 9, which kind of overlaps with this, which was the item making the charter and the contract comply with each other.
Right. And we never got to
We
that.
never got to that tonight, no.
Okay, so we'll follow procedure here. There's an amendment to the motion. So if we go ahead, so the amendment is to change the charter,
The amendment was to add this, C to the third paragraph,
sorry.
stating that the contract between the RSU 87 and the town be a 3-year contract. It doesn't have to be any more specific than that.
Yeah, we had a second. And it was a friendly amendment, no opposition to it. Okay. So first we vote on the amendment, or we table it.
okay, so I'm gonna allow that to go forward. Even though I think there's so many different parties in there, and I'm not gonna have any discussion on it because there isn't any allowed. So the motion is on the table to add a section C to the charter that's gonna recommend that the contract, and you're talking about the contract that's referenced above in the
Yes.
third paragraph
Yep.
that we have with RSU 87, that contract be reduced from 5 years to 3. Correct. No input from 87.
it's our charter saying that we're gonna have a contract,
I
it's
know.
a 3-year charter.
So we voting on that then?
That, we should vote on that since the amendment was put out there. So let's go ahead, we'll go all in favor of, so we're gonna be changing the charter, everybody know what the motion is? Changing the charter, adding a C to that, all in favor? All opposed?
And then back to the original.
No.
No, just want one big thing here.
I think so, right? We need to extend the meeting.
So let's go ahead, if we want to, we'll extend the meeting for, let's go 20 minutes, is that okay, to 7:20? Is that okay, people got time, people may already have plans, they gotta go.
I have to take off about 7:15, I'm good for 15.
Okay, so we'll go to 7:15. At that point too, okay, so let's go ahead and vote on that motion to extend the meeting, all in favor?
Right.
Opposed?
And are we gonna start to post the agenda?
I will have a chat with Mr. Seer.
You mean,
And then do we need to act on your motion, Stephanie? The original one?
well, technically we do.
That way?
It's
'Cause
on,
you
it's
have a
out
second.
there, so we
I
have
think
to,
we have to.
yeah, we have to do that.
We should have voted on that first before we
Oh.
allowed an amendment.
Before the amendment?
No, we have to do the amendment first, then you do the original.
And let's go ahead, so the motion's on the table, Stephanie, let's go ahead and run that, I mean, we're asking the charter to stay as is at this point.
With the
And,
amendment.
and I'm sorry if there's a Robert's rules in there that we just trampled on, I didn't,
I'm gonna retract my motion. How about
okay, and you need a second to do that?
I don't think you can.
I don't think you can do that second.
I think because we've already
We
voted,
can, we can.
no, I think we've already voted on, nothing's changing, I mean, we're just gonna hold the same as it is.
Yeah, what is changing?
It's
Because
just
the amendment is now attached to the motion, so it means that the contract won't change except for 3 to 5 years, 5 to 3 years.
So we're only, the motion, the amendment's just to change it from 3 to 5 years.
Right.
Excuse me, from 5 to 3 years.
And with her motion, nothing else would change except for if it's passed,
So I
except for
don't
that.
know if we can
amendment.
change the motion, because that wording is different.
You're not changing the motion,
Her motion was that nothing were to change.
but the amendment changed it.
You
and
know,
it was
the
voted on.
amendment is an add-on. Nothing else changes.
I'm gonna have to rewatch this video.
You can't have two motions on the table.
That means you're all done.
When you make an amendment to a motion, if the amendment passes, it becomes part of the motion.
Agreed.
So we can defeat the motion, the original motion, if you wanted to.
So the motion is on the motion is on the table to keep the agenda exactly how it, keep the charter as it is, except for what the changes the amendment made.
That means you're all done.
What's that?
That means you're all done. The committee's done, this ad hoc committee's done, you go away, because you're saying the whole charter.
No, we're just
No,
talking about one
no, no,
So
paragraph.
we're talking about 6.01.
Yes.
Well, then that needs to be articulated, because all you've been saying is keep the charter as is.
So we were
It's
talking
Well,
about-
we were just talking about the paragraph that has to relate to the two members of the, from RSU 87. So even if that wasn't stated, hopefully the committee understood that that was the context of our conversation.
In the motion, I have down, change the wording of section 6.01 in regards to paragraph 3.
Three, and that's what I have to.
So all in favor of holding that charter language the same as it is, keeping it the same? All in favor? All opposed? Okay. And again, just in case people, this conversation will continue even if we had a motion. This town council is gonna review these, as will the lawyer, so. That really was like a fancy tabling motion, so.
Yeah, and we are an advisory committee, we're not.
So, before we go, if it's okay, we're gonna go to public comment, if everybody's okay with that. And also, Josh, if we can, so the agenda for next week, we're going to, we've discussed that one. Okay, so example 8, which we didn't discuss, to allow delegates from RSU 87 to sit on committees only dealing with secondary school issues.
We may have solved that though by what we just said.
Yep.
But it is a good point. We haven't,
It is, okay.
okay.
I think it's gotta be in the charter, but we can have that discussion. Example 9, somebody had mentioned as a subject matter for the agenda, to require all contracts to be 100% compliant with the Hermon charter. So we'll go 8 and 9 on next week's agenda.
Plus you have the 3 questions that we posed to the attorneys that they haven't gotten back to us on.
Do you have those questions, Josh? What they are?
It was, well, it was whether the two members, if they could vote on the chair and vice chair,
Yeah, that was one.
if we could set term limits.
I think it's term limits.
And your third question,
I think it
we
was-
were looking for the amendments
One from
that
Hermon, one from
Kristen was working on
Right,
Friday.
yep.
So really, those 2 questions to the attorneys, and
So
1 question to our clerk.
if at all,
I thought the third attorney question was whether we could make Levant and Carmel versus RSU 87. That was the discussion of whether it had to be one from Levant, one from Carmel.
We never really voted on that.
No, because I thought it went to ask the lawyer of his RSU 87 versus a towns.
Okay.
so just define that question.
That update from the lawyers on that, I'll do that with them.
I think it was supposed to be, what's the date? Is that today?
That's today. And then this discussion on that. Yeah, I'm gonna say
Yes.
the red line changes that.
So for next week on new business would be just to add, to go continue discussion on charter sections.
Well, we haven't.
Okay, and then we're gonna keep 8 and 9 for old business?
Yes.
And then one other thing, maybe it's old business, but did we resolve the articles question? We need to do anything.
Let me check on that and
Okay.
see.
Yeah.
'Cause that maybe was
Summary?
an update that
This,
should have happened that
Summary.
hasn't.
I mean, I think we solved it, but.
It's summarizing something that's not there.
And we wanna move public comment to the beginning of the meeting?
If we have an agenda where they know what they're
When the-
discussing.
Well, I think when we have an agenda, we gotta keep the community informed and make sure
If we
that
set the
everybody.
agenda tonight, like I can have the agenda done tomorrow, that's easy enough.
Let's do that then.
So if we set it tonight, that's no problem.
So do you have any more you need on the agenda? Those 2 items plus the 3 questions that we posed to the lawyer.
We discussed last time that when we were through, whether or not we put together a summary of pros and cons for each of the items to give to the council so they know what our thinking process was with each item, whether we wanna do that next week, or whether we wanna have a subsequent meeting the week after.
Can we put that on the agenda item for next week? And just so everybody knows, we're trying to figure out what this, does everybody have a copy of that document that currently listed, it was this color last week, that basically showed the questions and the motions that we had. We just want to expand that document to give the discussion how the group came to that motion. In addition to that, ascension's not the right word, but the opposite discussion of what right. And again, that's the same format that an official charter commission would use when they're proposing their work to a town council. So that's the only reason to discuss it, that might be good. And that way too, the town council doesn't have to go and do a whole lot of their own research if they already, they can, they probably will, they should, but they don't have to spend a lot of time wondering what we were
Be
thinking.
like a dissenting from the court.
Right. Sorry for the delay, folks. It's 7:10, so if we're okay, we're gonna go to public comments.
Yep, Greg Newell, Hermon. I think you've already started to discuss this, but please post the agendas and the minutes if possible. The other thing is, when you get to it, when you get to 6.08, the budget, number 3A3, it says it's career and technical education. It's one of the mandatory things that hasn't been presented. It wasn't presented at this last budget meetings as a cost center or whatever you guys want to call it. And it wasn't presented last year, so maybe we can redefine that wording to more appropriately reflect what is actually being presented.
6.6. Sorry, Greg. 6.
Yep, 6.08, letter A, number 3.
Okay, hold on, so we get oh, okay, yep.
The other thing is, probably should be some sort of definition of what a subcommittee is at some point in time and this is, I've heard it's a subcommittee, I've heard it's a workshop, I've heard now it's an advisory group. The school committee probably really needs to define what those really are, because I've heard all 3 definitions, and they all mean slightly different things since words mean things. Right now, during the policy meetings, there's 1 Hermon representative and there's 1 RSU 87 representative in those discussions. So 1 person's representing 4 Hermon people and 1 RSU person's representing themselves, 1 other person. And for all the policy meetings I've been to over the past few years, there's very little discussion or intake from the public, and then when it gets to full committee, those 4 other representatives from Hermon now have to take up those discussions during full committee time, which extends the committee meetings for a long time because they only have 1 person representing them, where RSU was a 1-to-1 ratio. So if we're talking about fairness here, that's another thing. Also, when you talk about our full member rights, that means they can then vote on the contract with themselves. If they're a full member and have full member rights, when they do a contract with RSU 87, they can vote on the contract for RSU 87. And all they have to do is sway 2 people to say, hey, you really need to do this, it's going to be in your best interest, to sway 2 people. And then they would have a 4-to-3 vote in favor of themselves. So just keep that in mind when we're talking about these numbers. It wouldn't take much for 2 people to get swayed because I've already heard 2 people say, why can't they vote on everything? So keep that in mind. Let's see, what else? Yep, that's all I have. Thank you.
So can I ask for a clarification?
Yes, absolutely, sir.
So I just wanna make sure.
Yep.
You said,
Number 3?
yeah, career and technical education. Are you saying that it should be defined as a specific budget?
It's not being presented at this time.
Okay.
There's no cost center that says
Okay.
career, so it either needs to be removed
Yes, yeah,
or redefined.
right, okay. And I'm good on that one. The question that I might ask is that a school committee issue?
Well, so let's just say, yes, absolutely, so say RSU 87, they're not gonna vote on their own contract, they're gonna abstain from that vote, because it's a conflict of interest, and those items are already being handled appropriately, so.
So you mean, are you now?
But
Like,
as a
his-
full
his-
member, they wouldn't have to.
No,
his
wait a second, are we
concern.
talking about the technical, career and
Conflict of
technical?
interest is the same across all boards and committees. Where
Yeah.
there's a defined conflict of interest, they would not vote in it, and I think that is clear. And then in regard,
Yeah,
Well- Well, if that was the case, then conflict of interest for people running for school committee would be solved also, but that isn't solved either. So, those policies all get mixed up. What's your question, sir?
My second question is, and maybe it's a question that's maybe for the attorneys. So the contract is negotiated between the superintendents. The school committee signed this, but I think that the council has to agree to this contract.
no, sir.
So the school committee can contract away from the council.
The school committee can engage.
I'm not saying you
engage in-
don't come up with the contract, but doesn't the contract then need the approval of council?
No, because the other school contracts wouldn't require the town council to be involved in their other contracting. So why would we make this contract different? Whether it's a contract to install a boiler or the PFAS or any large contract, it does not require the town council to approve it, other than it's in the budget. So they approve the budget, they don't approve specific contracts.
John, sorry, Greg. John, why don't you make a note of that, we can put that or have that discussion, no, I don't mean to, I'm not trying to.
No, I'm
But-
good. I'm good.
But during public comment, we could probably get in a lot of this if we wanted to. But please make a note of that.
Yeah, no, I'm on it,
Thank you.
I'm on
It
it.
sounds like it's interesting and we should have
Well,
where they're brief, we should have a
The
conversation.
town council should approve all the school.
It sounds like there are already answers to it, but let's see. Okay, more public comment?
I can just speak to what he's saying, the schools are all elected bodies, so they don't need the town to vote on it, so I'll answer that question.
okay, is that true?
Yes,
For
yeah.
sure, okay,
Yeah.
good, I believe you.
She's on the school committee.
Oh, okay.
I'm a little unclear why you guys try to do a hard stop at 7 when, you prolong your business when you don't get it all done in your 1 hour meeting. It seems like it keeps getting pushed down the line and there's not a lot of productivity there. Also, when you're on these committees, it would be great to be informed when you come and have done the research, and a lot of the questions that I sat here and listened to, I could have given you the answers because I happen to know the information. So if you want some feedback, I can provide that for you. The statement keeps being said, you know, what are the issues we're looking to solve? The issues are, we're not looking for issues, we're also preventing issues, we're preventing confusion. So work smarter, not harder. Like, let's make it clear so that when people go and they look for the information, they're not having to search everywhere for it and over here and over there. Just make it clear. As far as secondary issues, we are the only school that I'm aware that I've worked through main school management and have already dealt with all of this on secondary issues. We are the last school in the state that has this type of contractual agreement, and they have been very clear in the statute what secondary is and what they can and cannot do. They are representatives, that's how they talk about themselves as representatives. And main school management and their attorneys have already made it clear they're not to vote on things unless it's secondary. I agree, it's not very many things, but that'd be like us going over to their elementary school and trying to go and operate their board.
they have two schools that they already oversee and that they were elected to represent. They're not gonna come over here and try to also represent our elementary school and middle school. That doesn't make any sense, and that's not what their purpose is. They're to deal with only high school, because that's the contract.
Yes, that's in the contract, it's already defined.
I agree.
Right, but you're saying the members of full authority to vote on all things, and that's not accurate, so.
Yes,
why-
it is
never
accurate,
said
it's
that.
in our charter, that's the frustration, is it's in our charter. That it says that they are full members, it's written in the charter, that's why.
I think it's safe to say we should have a legal description on that, so I don't think we should say it's
I
in
can
the charter.
provide
I
you
think
what
we should
legal
have.
management lawyers have said.
If you do, send that to the committee, we'd like to see it.
Sure, I think I may have already sent it to the council and to
So you
Josh.
just voted to keep it the same, so.
Well, again, just so you know, this committee is advisory.
Yes,
We are making advisories to the town council. They certainly will have the last word on those, and they certainly could have an enhanced discussion there if they wanted to, and even they would have access to a lawyer right then if they wanted to have it. So I think sometimes as an advisory, we're just trying to, along the 7 o'clock also piece, Ms. Haley, Ms. Keiser, is that I think we started very early on in the meeting saying we were trying to keep it to an hour.
sure.
So
I
that
agree.
was the only reason for
Yes,
that.
and
We
sure.
weren't trying to.
No, I understand it for sure. I just wanted to provide feedback that, I mean, the point of this is to allow community input and to hear that community has been cut off, that is problematic at many levels. And the last thing I hear a lot of time, but why was this removed? Why was that removed? It doesn't really matter because we're going forward. So what are we running into of the confusion? It says secondary in the articles. It was there for a reason. It was so that it was super clear. So just carry it forward. It doesn't matter why it was removed or omitted or mistakenly. Just make it more clear. That's the point. Make it clear so that we don't keep having these discussions. That's all I have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll go to any additional committee members. John, we're gonna add your piece to additional, would you make a note of that
Yes.
for committee member items?
How many additional meetings are we having? It was my understanding that next week was the last
13.
one.
No, I'm just kidding. Well, I think what we were hoping for, Josh, within the next meeting or so, that we would formulate a document highlighting all of our work.
Mhm.
So how long do you think it's gonna take? I mean, we just went through the agenda for next week, so
Yep.
how long do you think it would take to create that document that we're ready to?
So I started on that today to get ahead of that for next week's meeting. So I'm hoping at the end of next Wednesday night, we pretty much have a ballpark idea. That we can include it next Thursday in the next meeting's agenda, so that should be our focus next week.
If you wouldn't mind, when you do when the agenda's done, would you add to that list of where we were at, the items we've spoken to in the motions and so forth? And I know this time we've tabled a couple things, but certainly would you just, if you would just kind of consider that a running list and hand that just so the committee knows, it's kind of nice to know the amount of work that we've already done,
Yeah.
rather than, because you look at this, it's like, we're still got 5 items or whatever it is,
Right.
when in fact, we've gone through and done, we've handled.
We
quite a
really
bit, so.
have, yeah.
Quite
And,
wise.
and I think that's something that I would ask, I think that'd be good for us to discuss too again, and come up with that as a group, maybe with an additional meeting, just so we capture it all, and that'd be helpful.
If we miss anything.
Yeah.
I just had a question too, so we've been focusing on the school committee stuff. Are we gonna talk about the other part of the town
Yeah.
manager? Or I had,
That's
I had a couple questions on section 8.
Yeah.
If we're not gonna do that,
Create those questions, and we talked earlier
Right.
that we had left number 1, let's go 1, 2, and 3. We had left 1 and 3, we were needing some guidance through the lawyer, so
Yep.
if you provide that guidance, that'll tell us how much 1 and 3 work we should do. or
And when I emailed them, I told them I'd really like to have it for
Okay.
our May 1st meeting, so. I'm hopeful they'll have that for us by next Wednesday.
well, the other possibility is, do we wanna skip a week, hoping that all this stuff will come together? And in 2 weeks, we maybe will be better prepared? I don't care.
That would be up to the lawyers if they just sound like the lawyers. But if they just sound like they're nowhere near creating a document we need or advice, then, I mean, it'd be up to the committee.
And they've been working on the questions for a while. I mean, these new ones we've thrown at them, but the other two they've had for a bit. And it was a week and a half ago when Tim Pease said that he was gonna provide that, so. I nudged him today to say we're looking to wrap this up next week.
Okay. Well,
We
there's
should
still,
have a better idea at the end of next meeting if we need more time or not.
there still seems like there's more work in the RSU 87 issue, so that seems like that may be, unless people disagree, that may be focused on where we're going.
Do you know what would help me too, if you guys were good with this, if you could just write a line about each of the things that you just mentioned and maybe pass it on to Josh. Cause what happens to me, it goes out, in and out, and so I just, cause I don't wanna neglect stuff that was said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't mean we're gonna do anything with it.
Any other committee items?
I vote to adjourn.
Vote to adjourn, second it. All in favor? Thank you, folks.
Correct, is the recording?
Oh, the town one still.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate the input, but you know what, there were a lot of points, and it was like, I was trying to write it out, and I got lost.
Bigger and
Well, originally, I wanted to have this start.
Yeah, I can't.
Okay.
It was just to give more time. This is, we're trying to get a lot done in a small window, but it doesn't mean that we don't get right now.
well, I certainly want the council to have pre-knowledge that they can have first. They don't have, I mean, they could turn around and spend as much time as we did on these items if we don't do anything.
Josh, what I'd love to have the town look into is finding a voting registration that doesn't impact the voting. That's what I really
Hey,
want
I'm
to
with you,
accomplish.
I'm with you
So,
on that.
how do I get that on the town council's radar?
Well,
I'd really like to have a voting location that doesn't impact children's learning. Children, because it's a remote date for cats, and that's problematic, as you know, with daycare issues. So
Yeah,
that's
and
something
I
that would
was
be
surprised
really
that-
impactful.
Yeah, I mean, because typically they've always been in session, and then this year it went remote or.
And I'm talking